there's a brief moment of satisfaction in achieving something, and then you're just back to who you are, right? So that's why I constantly, every single day, work on my own mindset around it. Because if you can't choose to be happy right now, when, right?
Welcome to the Generations of Wealth podcast. I am your host, Derek Dombeck, and today we are talking to a gentleman named Jens who is originally from a different country, moved to this country. He's been here for a long time at this point, but didn't start his entrepreneurial journey until he was in his mid 40s. And I think it's a really, really great concept to explore because, it's never too late. Certainly mid 40s is not too late, but Jens has done a lot of great things. Going to be a great show for you to listen to. Before that, I just want to express my appreciation to all of my regular listeners and those of you just finding us. Anything I can do to help you, please don't hesitate to reach out. DerekDombeck.com, thegenerationsofwealth.com, or shoot me an email direct at Derek at globalgow.com. With that, let's bring on Jens Nielsen. And coming to us from the Santa Fe, New Mexico area, Jens Nielsen. Jens, thank you so much for giving us some of your time on the Generations of Wealth show.
Thanks, Derek. I'm excited to be here today.
Well, I would love to just have you start out telling the audience a little bit about yourself and who you are, where you come from, and I know from our previous conversations how really kind of excited and interesting you are as far as what your journey's been. But let's start at the beginning.
All right. Well, hopefully my story is interesting to your audience, but as people can maybe hear, I have a little bit of an accent, and my name is not the most common one. So I grew up in Denmark, the country of Denmark. Left at 23 years of age because I wanted to explore the world, and it started out by a trip to London, England. Lived there for about a year and a half. It was in kind of in telecommunication those days. That led to a transfer to the United States in 1996. So coming up on 30 years. Next year will be 30 years since I moved over here, and did what I was supposed to do, right? Get an education, get my undergrad, my master's, and work for different corporations for many years, right? In IT, telecommunication and IT, and do all the things that you're supposed to do. And it was a great lifestyle. I mean, never lack for money. But, in my mid 40s and a long time in, right, I kind of woke up. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Why am I working for somebody else on somebody else's dreams? And at that time, I looked around and everything just looked like another job. Everything looked like, consulting would be a job, or starting a business seemed like, or, some sort of other business. Like that's when I stumbled on real estate like 10 years ago. I was like, oh, well, there it is, right? That's the avenue that we need to pursue. And started out buying small multifamily here down in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, 4 units and then 11 units, and then slowly grew with my own money, with some joint ventures. And then I got, so excited about the whole thing that, hey, we got to make this a business. And that then turned into, started syndicating larger deals and leaving my job and just kind of go full time into the real estate investing space. And I think since then, I think we purchased 2,500 units, if I count up, and sold maybe 500, 600 of those already, and are actively managing, the 1,900, 2,000 units. So that's kind of where we are now. Do this full time, um,
Are,
basically.
are you an LP in those syndications or are you
LP
putting
and
together?
GP. No, I mean GP in I think the last count is 34 different deals we've done. Of course, LP myself in them as well, and LP in
Mhm.
other deals as well. But these are active deals. I'm not counting, third party deals that I've invested passively in.
Yeah. Well, I've had quite a few guests on, the last couple months that are in the same space, syndications and commercial, specifically apartments. And so we've had a lot of conversations, and I always ask the same question of everybody, where do you think the market's going, and what do you think is happening in your region, as well as potentially on a national level, if you have any experience with that.
Yes, I mean, I've been blessed or to actually have deals around the country. So it's gone from Georgia to Arizona to New Mexico to Oklahoma to Ohio to Pennsylvania to New York. So I've actually done deals in all these different markets. And I will tell you that, well, the Georgia and Arizona stuff we sold made good money on it. I'll tell you that the Midwest, certain parts of the Midwest have done good for us. Certain parts have absolutely been incredibly challenging. I actually do love like rural Pennsylvania has done well for us. Rural New York has also done well, but some inner cities, Cleveland, Ohio has been very challenging for us, right? So that's kind of I've seen it from a lot of different areas, and some areas are much better than others when it comes to that. And where's the market going? I mean, as you know, Derek, right? Insurance, taxes, repairs and maintenance has been the uncontrollable expenses that have just gone through the roof. And then combined with high interest rate has created tremendous amount of pressure on the market in general, right? It's been man, it's been a year and a half since we did our last apartment purchase. We've done some industrial, like warehousing and stuff since then, but apartments, just anything doesn't pencil, or so everything, most doesn't pencil right now, right? So where's the market going? I think there is a tremendous correction going on right now. Distressed deals selling at low prices, sellers that are forced because of refinance or low maturities that are forced to sell at less than what they purchased for in many cases, right? That's what I'm seeing. Of course, real estate is something that will always be there. So this is a great buying opportunity to see if you can persuade your investors to invest with you right now.
Well, that's the key. That your last statement is very, very important. Taking care of your investors first and foremost, so that they have the confidence to take that leap of faith based off of your experiences, right? And and there's a lot of investors that are getting wiped out, got wiped out. You know, my big pet peeve with a lot of syndications is they go into them getting bank financing for 60, 70, 75% of the purchase, raise the rest. That's a fairly standard syndication model, except they don't, in my opinion, they don't really take into account what happens when the rates went up and how that affects their investors. And so the cash calls and the emails and phone calls to their investors telling them, "Hey, you either got to put in another 100 grand or you lose everything." That's happening all over the country right now. What I prefer to do, and in funds that I've raised in the past have just all been private money. I don't get institutions involved, and that's much harder to do, but it's a lot easier when you have challenges to deal with people rather than institutions, in
Hmm.
my experience.
So when you say private money, you mean like individual LPs then versus, yeah,
Right, right. So for me, I've raised money. I used to run a hard money lending company, so that was all private funds. And
yeah.
but what's been your experience with the institutional side of things?
So we don't have a ton of experience in the institutional side, right? Going out there and raising from family offices and so forth, right? Um, I I'm exposed to that in some LP deals where, the institution they end up becoming, being pref equity.
Hmm.
And if more money needs to be put in, they suddenly squeeze out the LPs, right? Because they sit there after the debt, after the bank. And, that obviously puts a huge squeeze on the LPs. But I get it, right? If you're putting additional millions of dollars in, you want some sort of protection for that, right? And,
Hmm.
just like many other operators out there, we have some deals that have also required some cash infusions. And we are probably going to structure that as pref equity just so you're not, so when you start putting more money in and certain LPs doesn't want to participate, you're putting more pain on them, those who doesn't want to participate, right?
Right. So there's a lot of doom and gloom, but there's also a lot of opportunity. And that's the beauty of being an entrepreneur is looking for and then taking action on the opportunity. What do you see if you can't find apartment deals? Um, you did mention a couple other asset classes, but what do you see moving forward for yourself and your people?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, what I definitely, looking through, our experience and so forth, what makes the most sense, right, is buying something that is fairly stable at a good value and getting low leverage, agency debt, right? I mean, I think that's the safe way of doing it, and that you don't need to, raise rent by $500 in order for this deal to work, right? Because that's how people are getting crushed when they can't meet their rent projection. So that's what we love to do, right? And that I think the deal we did in New York, you know, that's the same thing. We got it at a great rate and got agency debt on there, and it's going fantastic, right? But what we then pivoted to, because it was just so difficult to find deals that made sense, was the industrial space, right? So when I mean industrial, for me, that means flex space or warehousing, right? And we did buy a deal in December in Albuquerque. It is what, 35,000, 37,000 square feet of like Class C warehousing.
Hmm.
Bought it vacant, so we took a bit of a risk there, but within a couple of months, we got one institutional tenant in there, like telecommunication provider, rented the whole space, triple net, one tenant. They pay all the utilities, everything else. And it's just like, all right, we can just sit back and and enjoy, right? Versus, apartments, you're gonna replace tenants every month and all this stuff. So I kind of like it, um, of course, there's the risk if there is a downturn in the economy, or if your tenant moves out and you're going to spend, it takes months to fill it. So reserves are really important in a case like that. We also have some flex space, which are like smaller, 1,500 square feet type units. They rent pretty easily as well, right? So I love that avenue right now.
Yeah, I've had a good friend of mine for quite a few years now. He's been going and buying up shopping malls, like strip centers, but specifically getting tenants in there that are service industry only and staying away from retail type stores.
Mm.
And he does very well at it, but he's got very specific needs or wants when he's buying those types of properties. But I've always loved the model. I've not explored it myself, but
Oh.
um, so I want to kind of pivot a little bit here, Jens, because you talked about your journey from Denmark to here and all the things, and you were in your mid 40s when you kind of discovered real estate. But at this point, I mean, you also help people that and kind of coach people that are in some transformational parts of their life. Um, would you mind sharing some of
No,
that?
absolutely. Yeah, because, and let me step back, right? At 45 years old, right? Been working for somebody else for my whole life, very good at my IT job, right? I was a technician. I'm very good at that. I think I was. But so we have this mindset of like, we are very good technicians, but we don't have the mindset of entrepreneurship, of taking risk, trusting ourselves, and all these things, right? Because we always relied on somebody else to find a client, give us the work, right?
Mhm.
So at that point, right, it's easy to go and sign up for a course, or take my $25,000 program over the weekend to learn how to buy real estate. Everybody can do that. The problem is if you don't start changing your beliefs, your limiting beliefs, your mindset, most people don't take any action, right? Because there's too much fear, there's too much hesitation, there's too many voices in your head that said why you shouldn't do that, right? So when I started, I had enough courage to go and buy the fourplexes and the smaller deals myself, but I was like, how do I go and raise money? How do I go and buy bigger deals? How do I build the team and all these different? How do I start making a name? Quote unquote, making a name for yourself, if you will. And that required just a different mindset. So the only reason why I ever quit my job, Derek, was because I hired a coach that helped me think through all this stuff. And I was
Mm.
like, he's like, your opportunity cost is so big of continuing to work. It was during the pandemic and all this stuff. So I ended up quitting at probably one of the scariest time in our lifetime, right? But it just completely transformed my life. And at that point, I realized, okay, real estate is a long-term wealth generator. It's a passive income. But my passion is to help other people find more joy, more creativity, more, pursuit of really their full potential. So at that time I started into the coaching and mentoring world, right? So I mean, right now my business is the real estate stuff, and it's also one-on-one mindset coaching, mentoring, business consulting, all this stuff, because that's where my passion is, probably more so than the real estate at times.
So if I was your student, how do you start walking me through that journey?
I need to understand what's important to you, Derek, right? Because a lot of people come like, I want to buy real estate. Okay. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Let's really figure out if that is the truth, right? Or you just saw it online, you get excited about it. So really want to understand you know, part of you, what is your vision? What are your goals? What are you trying to achieve here? And maybe it's real estate, maybe it's something else, but let's step back. Let's figure out what you truly want. And when that is clear, then we can start, working through your productivity, your courage, your influence, your purpose. So we get all those things very clear in your mind, because then all the technical stuff tends to work itself out. Yeah, I'll help you underwrite a deal. I'll help you write an LOI. I'll help you those things, but that comes naturally after we have become incredibly clear on these other things, right?
Well, I
Would you?
love this topic because here at the Generations of Wealth, our mantra is live your vision, love your life. And if you don't know what your vision is, most of the time people get into real estate because somebody else told them they should. And I'll use myself as an example. When I started in 2003, everybody that was selling at that time books and tapes, right, before CDs and everything else, it was go and get 100 units that all cash flow $100 per door, make $10,000 a month, and you're living the dream. And people just they take that and they drink that in, and they drink the Kool-Aid, and they're hooked. And ironically, it wasn't all that long ago, probably still 5 years ago, I still heard people saying, go get 100 units that cash flow $100 a door and make $10,000 a month. And, that dollar amount doesn't really amount to much in today's economy, but they're still selling that same dream. What they don't tell you is 100 units is a lot of damn work. It's a full-time job. And is that really your vision? So I love what you're talking about. Like, I want to figure out what I want my personal vision to look like first, and then build a business that supports that personal vision. 99% of entrepreneurs and just people in general go and work their ass off, and they say to themselves, someday I'll be able to enjoy the fruits of my labor. But someday often never comes the way they thought it would, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, the when then thinking, right?
Yeah.
Once we get to some unknown destination, we will be happy, right? And it's a and Derek, I mean, I've been caught up in the exact same thing. Okay, once I can quit my job, right? Once I have X amount of cash flow, once I have the new house or the new car or whatever, then will be happy. And the reality is it doesn't work that way, right? There's a brief moment of satisfaction in achieving something, and then you're just back to who you are, right? So that's why I constantly, every single day, work on my own mindset around it, because if you can't choose to be happy right now, when, right? I mean, if you can't choose this, and I absolutely 100% agree what you said, that there's a lot of entrepreneurs that build a business and they try to fit their life around it, right? I have a partner, a business partner, client's like, oh man, I wish I could spend the winters. He lives in upstate or in Pennsylvania. I wish I could spend the winters in the South somewhere. I was like, well, the way you're building your business, that's never going to happen,
Mhm.
right? and then it's like, okay, you're right, because once the reality is there, and it's not, someday in the future, you got to start making those changes right now because otherwise you're just a miserable entrepreneur, like you were miserable in your W-2 job, right?
And that's really the truth is we trick ourselves, we fool ourselves into thinking that we're doing something better. Like people will leave a 9 to 5 job to start a 5 to 9 business. And they're like, I'm a business owner. No, you're not. You're self-employed and you're working more, twice of what you used to work. And oftentimes you have less money, right?
Hmm.
So, and I'm not saying that I'm any different than anyone else. Like we all have these struggles. This is I love the fact that you mentioned you work on yourself daily because it is a lot of peaks and valleys in the entrepreneur world. And just from my own personal experience, sometimes when you figure out your vision, you discover that things that you thought were important are not, and it can create some big turmoil in your life. I had a business partner for 10 years, and we got to a point where our vision just did not align anymore. And thankfully, we're still friends. It was an amicable separation of our businesses. But if we didn't have clear visions, we could still be business partners today, and resentment builds and animosity builds and all the things, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it is tough. I mean, it's and I think also the American society is focused on that achievement, right? We look around and we see people with their whatever it is that we desire, and we're like, oh my God, if I had that, everything would be better, right? And we strive for that thing because that we think that the happiness and the fulfillment comes from that. And having we just realize, well, just because you have $1 million in the bank doesn't really make you feel any different, right? It's just kind of that reality of how life is.
Is that different from your upbringing in Denmark? The American thought process, mindset?
So yeah, I think so. I mean, America is very much like, hey, everybody's their own out there to create their own luck, right? And you can, if you work hard and you push hard, you can see that success. Denmark is, I think, it's more focused on the common good, right? There's not a lot of like incredibly wealthy people there, but there's also not a lot of incredibly poor people, right? So it's more,
Hmm.
and I think the middle class is bigger in that case, right? And people tend to put more effort into, hey, we're going to work reasonable work hours. We're going to spend time with our families. We're going to do things that really are more for the social good, right? And that's that is different, and I think we can learn something from that.
I think so too. And I've traveled to quite a few third world countries over the years, and I see the United States is evolving into a third world country. I mean, there is definitely a large burden put on the middle class from a taxation standpoint, and it is widening between the upper class and the lower class, and the middle class is being pushed into lower class. Um, and it's not good, bad, or anything else. It's just my viewpoint of it. But I think a lot of that is lack of financial education. Um, I mean, our school systems, quite frankly, as I have 3 children in school, I think our school systems are horrible in the financial education space, primarily because the teachers teaching the classes don't have financial education. So how can they teach it, right?
Yeah, I agree. And it was interesting. I worked with a client. It was this spring, young man. I think he's in early 20s, right? Doing it, first job out of college and stuff. And his dad is more of an entrepreneur. And he's like, hey, I want you to talk to my son and just help him understand a little bit of this stuff, right? Because you hear it from your dad and it may not really sink in, but then he started hearing it from me, right? And we're talking about the difference between a job and a business, or as you said, your business is not really business, it's just another job, right? Or
Mhm.
leveraging yourself and all these things, right? So it opened up his mind. It's like, oh yeah, you're right. I need to start thinking that way a little differently, right? So, yeah, if we could have more of that for our young people, that would be amazing. you know, I think would help because I think ignorance also keeps the middle class in check at times. Right?
Oh, absolutely. Ignorance is bliss, right? Until it's not, and you're now no longer middle class.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
But how do you, okay, so how do you coach that young person? They want to get started in their entrepreneurial journey. We're going to use real estate as the vehicle because that's what we both know. How do you coach that person who doesn't have any money? They don't have any experience. Where do they where do they start and where do they aspire to go?
Yeah, I mean, every person's situation is a little bit different, but the thing is, if you're 20 or 22 years old, right, you have a long runway. I'm not saying you quit tomorrow and stay job. You have a long runway, and the key, I mean, as we know, right, how do you build wealth? You live below your means, you save money, and you invest money, right? So the starting point could just be, okay, let's take a look at what is it you want? What do you want to do, right? Do you want to, is real estate the thing you want to get into? Great. How can you live below your means and start saving some money, right? Because, maybe you don't buy your own house. Maybe you buy that fourplex and you live in one of the units or something. You just got to get into it somehow through thrift, through sacrifice, right? Because in this, I think, not to beat on the younger generation, right? But there's maybe a lack of patience. There's a lack of like, okay, I sacrifice my lattes and my other things, so in 5 years I can live that nobody else can, right? Or in 10 years. So there's a little bit of that piece there. Then there's also a little bit of this piece of like, well, if you are young and you have the energy and you want to go and renovate houses or flip houses or buy rentals, you may be able to find, older people that has money but doesn't have the time, and you can partner with them. You're in the hard money lending space, right? I mean, you know, maybe your uncle can lend you some money and you can get going on it, whatever. So just think outside the box, be creative, use your resources, and so forth. Now, this person I mentioned, he's a little bit unique because his family owns real estate, own businesses in back home. So this is more like, okay, do you actually want to come back and be part of that? So that was where the coaching was kind of leading to, right? And so forth. See, how can you fit into this existing business world, right?
And that's what I tell people when they approach me and friends of mine as well. Like years ago, if they said, "Hey, Derek, I want to take you to lunch." Okay, I'm going to go to lunch and I'm going to have somebody we're going to talk for an hour to 2 hours. And now I have to turn people down when they say I want to take you to lunch. I it's not the highest and best use of my 2 hours to get a $15 hamburger. But that's an important lesson to people starting out. It doesn't matter what the age, we're talking about the younger generation, but it could be somebody in their 40s or 50s that are just starting on their journey. Go and approach somebody that may be willing to mentor you, but bring value. Don't just go there to suck information. If you've got skills, there's a lot of people that are our age that are not technical. I'm one of them. I am not techie. I don't like technology, and it takes me a lot longer to learn it. Once I learn it, I'm good with it, but then I don't like change. If I have somebody that's in their 20s or 30s that comes in and says, "Hey, I don't have any money, but I'll take care of all of your social media," right? Okay, great. I'll partner with you, or I'll teach you or mentor you. That's the thing. Everybody's got something if they look deep enough that they're skilled at. Bring value and, you know, give more than you take.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to bring that, as you said something important there. Don't just ask me, how can I help? Because then it becomes my problem to figure out what your skills are so you can help me. Instead is do some research on me and so forth. That, oh, Jens's social media sucks. I'll run your social media for you, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Then I was like, okay, now you're actually bringing real value to me, right? Don't make it my problem to figure out how you can help me, because that's not very valuable to me, right?
Yeah, I
Spend
think
enough.
that is such a great point. I've had that many times, people that will say, I could do this for you, I could do that for you. Well, I already have staff that does that, and we've spent countless hours putting this system together. Plugging you in would be a hindrance. So, like to your point, go and find something else or ask better questions. How can
Mhm.
I help? But is there areas that you're struggling with that I can go and research and then come back to you with suggestions. I love that point.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe it's your TikTok channel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I
but
don't know
again, right?
about I don't know about you, Jens, but my MySpace account isn't doing very well anymore. So
Yeah, they need to revise that, revive that, right? That's from the old days. But yeah,
yeah.
no, I think this is where as a young person, right? Don't limit yourself to, oh, I don't have any money or whatever. No. If you can figure out what skill, use your skills to help somebody, that can be tremendous amount of value. And even like maybe you go back to real estate, my first joint venture was 38 units in Albuquerque for $1.2 million. We still own this thing, and it's a freaking cash cow, as you can imagine. My partner was, say, at that point, mid 70s. He was my broker, my property manager, and now also my friend. But what did I add value? How did I add value to him? Because he already owned a lot of apartments and stuff. The
Oh,
value I
you can
added, like
say
I did.
shitload here, Jens. It's fine.
He didn't, he a little bit of a deal junkie, but he didn't necessarily need another apartment building. But I did the underwriting. I, helped find some partners so we could do this joint venture, brought the money in, right? Help with a lot of that stuff, right? All he had to do was basically, he's the property manager. He had to run it and, run the renovations and so forth. But I added a lot of value by doing that instead of just going to him, hey, do you want to buy this? And then relying on him, right? So since then, we have partnered on multiple deals because he saw that initial value.
Mhm.
I wasn't young, I was in my 40s, but still I was inexperienced at that time,
Right. Absolutely. Well, what's one question I should have asked you that I didn't? And it can be about anything.
right? Where do I see myself in 5 years?
All right.
uh, now I have the answer to, I guess, but
Yes, sir.
the uh, as we talked about, right? What is passion versus what is wealth and stuff? I mean, I do see myself continuing to build around the coaching, the mentoring, because that's really where my passion is. Of course, that's a job to some degree. So, but it builds, it fills me every single day. So that growing that and become even an even better coach and mentor is really my goal. Real estate will still have a role in there, but it'll be much less active. I don't want to be an asset manager or all the stuff that's in the past.
I love it. And that's the beauty of building your business to your vision. You get enough passive income coming in from your investments to then you can go and do what you're passionate about, which for you is the coaching. And then you're truly living your vision.
Yeah. So that's a goal.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and your knowledge. I really just appreciate you being here.
Of course, Derek, it was a lot of fun.
Well, we're going to wrap this one up for everybody listening. You know, you always get a lot of nuggets out of every one of these shows, but go out there and help share this. Get some other people that don't know about the generations of wealth to follow us and you know, go on to social media. So our 20 something people that need to help us with our social media isn't giving us crap. That'd be great. So give us the reviews and all the things that help us grow the family. And until the next show, go and live your vision and love your life. See ya.